Here we are on the main slope in the main garden at the Alan Chadwick Garden at UCSC. We're about 2-3 miles inland from the Pacific, and we're at an 800-foot elevation. And we are, I might add, as you can see, on a very steep south-facing slope. Let's pause and look at that for a minute, pros and cons. South-facing slopes are warmer and more reflective, and the principal reason for that is the sun angle hits the ground closer to perpendicular than it does on flat ground. So south slopes, some call them sacred south slopes, are warmer than the surrounding area. Slopes in general, but particularly south slopes, are also usually either frost-free or have less frost. And the principal reason for that is that cold air is heavy and it moves down the slope to the bottom. So the slope itself, particularly the top and mid-range, will be either frost-free, as it is in this Mediterranean climate, or an area that has frost and cold winters, less frosty. And this can be, again, a principal determinant in, is this a good spot to grow, yay or nay? There are areas where, particularly the bottom of slopes, where cold air puddles and settles, that are called, they have frost pockets. And they're really not suitable for a lot of growing, particularly fruit trees, which you can get frosted out when your trees are in bloom in the spring. Very sensitive, delicate period determining whether you will or will not have a crop. The saying is, so much of fruit growing is about what happens in 2, maybe 3 weeks in the spring when the trees are in bloom. If it's warm, temps above 60 or so, not much wind, sun shines, and it doesn't rain, then the pollen in the flowers is viable, it flows, and it attracts pollinators, and you get pollination fertilization in a fruit set, and you get a good crop. You also, to the degree it doesn't rain or rain much during this bloom period, early fruit set period, you have a low incidence of disease. So that critical 2-3 weeks in the spring can determine crop or no crop, quality crop or not. Having a gentle south-facing slope with the aforementioned air drainage, slightly warmer conditions, that is, the angle of the sun striking more perpendicular, striking the ground in a more perpendicular angle, gives you warmer air and soil temperatures. That can be a boost. It can be a significant boost in growing whatever it is. But here we are on a due south-facing slope, a very steep slope, maybe 20 degrees. And let me just caution you, slopes are also dangerous in terms of erosion potential. And all the more so on a steep slope like this. We get rains somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to 40 inches per annum, fall to spring. And it is important to protect the soil from the impact of raindrops and the potential for erosion. So what I do is, before the season begins, the rainy season, as the first set of storms come in, I'm walking around before, during, and after a rain event, noting, are we covered up? How are we doing with erosion? And if it's a driving rain, I especially like being out here in the rain, especially when it's one of the first rains of the season. It's just downright refreshing. But I'm looking at the impact of the rain and its impact on the soil. Is there any erosion? So what are some of the things that we do to prevent erosion? We cover up, as I said. The idea is, as you move into the rainy season, that you have little or no bare soil. This bed is an exception. We just dug it, we're going to plant it, but right now and during this last rain event, over about 72 hours, we got in a vicinity of 10 inches, which is a lot. It's open. We'll look at it in a minute. But the idea is to have some sort of a mulch. You can see on the path beneath me here, beneath my feet, we have a wood chip mulch. We'll often use wood chips and or straw or leaves as a bed mulch. If this bed were to stay open for a while, I would put straw or leaves on top of it. The idea, the other thing you can do in terms of, there are living mulches. If you look at this bed here, we have an interplant of broccoli and pak choi here, and even though they've only been planted out a week or so ago, the leaf canopy is such that it's going to start to shield the soil. Eventually it will be a living mulch and protect the soil from the impact of raindrops. In the interim, as you see here, we have a very light straw mulch, such that it's like a little lattice like this. You can see the soil through, but yet it still softens the impact of the raindrops. And the reason for not doing a thicker mulch is as we go into the fall, I want to keep the soil as warm as possible to facilitate root growth, and a thick mulch will cool the soil. So a thin mulch serves the dual purpose of protecting, shielding the soil, and still keeping the soil open to UV sunlight and warmth like that. So in the aggregate, I'm okay with what happened this last 72 hours. I'm really okay with 10 inches of rain. It's really a welcome relief. We're storm doors open. Perhaps we'll get more shortly. In fact, they're now saying next Saturday we could have another rain event. Not as severe as what we just encountered, but given the severity of the rain, how much rain fell in, how intensely and how short a period of time, we're okay. But still, if you look at this bed here, we have a little bit of a crust developing on the surface. Again, this is easily remedied by hoeing, breaking the crust, mulching, and or planting and developing a living canopy mulch like that. So it's something of concern, but not major concern. The impact of raindrops hitting the soil is downright explosive. I've seen time-lapse photos, and it looks like a bomb going off. The raindrops come down, hit the soil, and break up the surface aggregation, and the sand and the silt and the clay separate from the nice aggregates. And usually what happens is the clay portion accumulates on the surface and seals off the soil, creating a crust. Once that crust is established and more rain comes, you get puddling. And after a while with puddling, the water will tend to start to run off and create erosion, and all the more so on a steep slope like this. So you want to be vigilant in terms of protecting your soil. It's just not natural to have open, bare soil in most natural systems around the globe. And to the degree you can, it would be good to prevent that during the wet season in the garden. Again, this is another interesting thing, that kind of pros, cons, contrast between farming and gardening. On a garden scale, we can totally cover up. We can mulch, we can do things like that. On a field scale, you can't really do that so much. So it's just kind of, you are both empowered by and limited by the scale you're working on, variously different aspects of growing. We're going to plant this bed shortly. We're not expecting any rain until potentially this next weekend, and we'll see if we get out here to plant. The soil is too wet to plant right now. I mean, you could do it, but it's not optimal. It just kind of, that ball that I put pressure to, it just doesn't succumb quite as readily as the soil we saw up above. So I'm not going to mess with it. We will come and break the crust with a hoe, easily done, and then see if we can get plants in here. When we get plants in here before the next rain, predicted this weekend, we'll put a light straw mulch or leaf mulch on it. In general, as far as mulches go, we use straw, and again, straw, not hay. Straw is the stock of the grain, oat, barley, rye, whatever. Hay includes the seed head. You're not wanting to seed oats, rye, barley, grasses into your vegetable crop beds. So we use straw, and it's a good mulch. We also use the leaves of deciduous trees. It's excellent. And that's what we pretty much use on our annual beds. Again, a cover crop or an established vegetable or flower crop is a type of living mulch. But on our trees, roses, perennial shrubs, etc., we use wood chips, and they are excellent simply as a mulch. They cap the moisture in and really reduce the amount of water we have to apply during the summer. They break down slowly, but not as slowly as you think pure carbon wood chips would, and they release their nutrients into the soil. And I've been using them for 35, 40 years simply because they were available free from the campus tree crew. And in the last 7, 8, 10 years, there's been some considerable research literature that shows the positive effect of wood chips on trees. And I wouldn't use wood chips, something so high in carbon, on a veg crop bed, an annual. I use the lighter, quicker to decompose straw and leaves. But the effects on the soil of wood chips is phenomenal. Again, as a mulch, sure, to keep water capped into the soil, sure. But as the chips break down, the way they ramp up soil biology is, well, how shall I put it, cray-cray. Really good. You see the physical aspects of the soil is radically improved. The soil is darker, obviously richer. And then you'll see a proliferation of earthworms and such like that. And even on a qualitative assessment level, you know, it's pretty darn good. And there's now people that are looking at it in terms of quantitatively. Well, how does the decomposition of these wood chips in tree systems affect the soil in a positive manner? Some friends of ours, an ex-apprentice working across the hill at Hidden Villa, had a set of fields on their farm. This is a public education demonstration-based farm. Both production and instruction happen, just as ours feature. They had a set of fields, I don't know, it was 3 or 4 acres, that had all manner of problems. Everything you can have that could be wrong with the soil was wrong in that field, including a lot of soil-based disease organisms. They couldn't really grow crops in it. So what they did is they got wood chips and piled it on really, really, really thickly, I mean insanely thickly, and they just waited. And I think they waited 3 or 4 years and watched and observed as the chips broke down. They also, it's a mixed operation, plants and animals, and so they run pigs. They would release the pigs, as it were, into the field. They had them, you know, cordoned off like that. And pigs are rooters, so they were kind of rooting around and disturbing and kind of gently incorporating the wood chips into the soil, kind of nice admixture like that. And they were adding their manure too, a rich source of nutrients like that. They connected with the USGS and some soil researchers to monitor this process over 3 or 4 years. And the quantitative data that they got kind of resonated with the qualitative data that you can get when you look at a soil that's been mulched with wood chips. This year, the chips had virtually decomposed and it was just soil. And they planted eggplants and peppers into them. And they said that and they kept data, their yields were off the charts. Both the quality, the size, the sheen to the eggplants and the peppers and the poundage produced like that. So wood chips can be a valuable mulch as well. The idea of putting them on bare soil for veg crops requires a number of years to wait until they break down. But straw and leaves, I put the straw on this bed lightly here, and by the time the broccoli crop is done in say 10 or 12 weeks, or certainly by the time we move in the late winter, early spring to work this bed and replant it again, that straw will basically be decomposed. Its nutrients go into the soil, and also the nature of the straw is such that it really improves soil structure. So just a little thing, you're always kind of walking around looking at how things are going, looking at how things are growing, and you're especially vigilant at the outset of a rain event or the rainy season. As we move more and more now, this will be the exception. Bare beds, not really interested in that. Beds with just emerging seedlings, yeah, let's get on with it and get some good plant cover and or come in and mulch like that. So, but we also do less quote-unquote production during the fall, winter, early spring, and we grow more cover crops to protect the soil and then turn them in as a green manure crop. If you look down below you here, you see a set of beds that have 2 different cover crops. On the far left, you see the little white flowers of an annual warm season, by and large, warm season cover crop called buckwheat. And it's not very tall in stature and has a skimpy little root system, and yet I call it a mighty mite. Its effects and its positive effects on the soil in terms of increasing organic matter and improving the soil structure is phenomenal. The section on the right, 3/4 of this bed, is a blend of white and yellow mustard, and they are a little more robust in terms of both their root and shoot growth, and they're another kind of utilitarian cover crop. They can be sown in the cool season, they can be sown in the warm season. They actually prefer to grow a little bit in the cool season more than the hot summer and the cold winter. So these are they've been in for about a month. They're up about knee high, and we'll keep an eye on the weather, and when we get a period, maybe we might do it midweek or next week, it's about time to turn this cover crop in. So what we're going to do is move in and chop it at the base, knock it down. I call it drop and chop. We'll come with a machete, chop it at the base, chop it in place to reduce particle size, and just flip it into the soil with our spades, and then mulch off. And into the mulch, we will sow another cover crop of probably mustard again. So as the green manure cover crop rots down below the surface under the mulch, we are simultaneously starting, it's a relay system here, a new cover crop that will grow through January, February. At that time of year, it'll be taller, maybe waist, chest high, and we'll come in again at some juncture, drop and chop, turn it into soil, mulch it off, wait, and then plant our vegetable or flower crop of preference in it for the summer. My early thinking is this would be a sweet spot, as it were, for sweet peppers.